It is starting, and it has started. Yay. Okay, so Dr. Conley, did you want to do, I guess most of the people in this Zoom already know you. Did you want to do a quick intro?
I think there are a few new people, but
Okay.
Again, everyone, welcome. My name is Dr. Lisa Conley. I am the Director of Career Development. I am also the instructor for INT 290, my Paul Hackett Scholars. So welcome to the Paul Hackett Scholars and also all of the other students on the call. This is our resume workshop, and I'm going to hand it over to Carly Burrell, who is my teammate. Take it away, Carly.
Hi, everyone. So like Dr. Conley mentioned, I'm Carly. I use they, she pronouns. I work in the Office of Career Development as the Career Development Coordinator. And so today we are going over, let me go ahead and share my screen just so we can make sure all of that is working. Okay. Okay, are you all able to see? Can I get a verbal confirmation that we can see the screen? Awesome, thank you. Great. So we are going over, this says resumes, cover letters, and personal statements. This is just because it's a PowerPoint that I've used for all three of those things. We're just going to focus on resumes and cover letters today, because it's quite a lot of content to cover. Expectations for this, objectives that you can get out of this. We're hoping to give you a fundamental overview of what the basic philosophy and the basic objectives and best practices behind creating a resume and creating a cover letter are. I'll share these slides with everyone who attended afterwards, so you'll have access to these resources, and any resources that I mention will also be available on our website. And as Dr. Conley has probably mentioned to most of y'all, we also do individual resume and cover letter and personal statement appointments. So if you have specific positions or educational opportunities that you're hoping to apply to and you want someone to get a more in-depth look at your document, please feel free to schedule that using Handshake. So this is going to be a very broad overview of best practices today. And then, like I said, we're happy to dive in on anything else. One moment, it's not letting me. There we go. So I always start with this meme. No one ever laughs at it, but it's fine. So this speaks to applicant tracking systems. So you'll find that in a lot of job applications, you'll submit your resume and then also maybe have to fill out all of that information again. And so we'll talk a little bit about those applicant tracking systems and how those work. So really quickly, I want to start off by asking what is y'all's understanding of what a resume is? And you can just you can raise a hand in the chat with the little raise hand button. All right. So we've got, is it Ton or Ton?
It's Kang.
Kang. Okay. Cool. Kang, take it away.
So when I think of resume, the first thing, it's like a paper that's all about you, like a list of your accomplishments, your skills. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So a paper document that's about you, your list of accomplishments. And I'm realizing now that these are formatted last name, first name. So I apologize. Now I'm on the same page. Anyone else have anything to add about what we think a resume is? Cool. So that was Kang gave us a really good starting place. So one of the reasons that I think it's important to start off with this is because a resume is a document with limited space, right? And so the more that you have an understanding of what employers are looking for or what grad schools are looking for or whoever you're submitting a resume to, the more that you can optimize the use of your space. And feel free at any point, I meant to say this earlier, if anyone has any questions, if you could just use the Teams raise hand function, and then I'll also have time for questions at the end. So if there's something that we don't get to in the middle, we'll reconvene for questions at the end. So a resume is a marketing tool that you use to promote yourself. It's very important to understand this because the resume is the time that you want to start practicing your own self-advocacy. So there are three main goals for a resume. So the first goal is exactly like Kang said, you want to promote your unique combination of strengths, skills, experience, and education. And everyone has unique combinations of those things. The second one is you want to grab the reader's attention, right? So especially in job applications, especially for large companies, recruiters are going to be sifting through hundreds and hundreds of resumes. You want their resume to be the one that makes them stop and say, I want to get to know this person more. And so the last main goal of a resume is to generate an interview, right? So if you've grabbed their attention, if you've promoted your strengths, you want them to read the document and say, I would like to have a conversation with this person because I want to know more about them. So we're gonna start as far as formatting, just talking from a top-down perspective. So I'm gonna start with the heading. The heading is the easiest part. So this is just a generic example, but you're gonna have your name. It's gonna be the largest thing on your resume. It can be in a different font from the body of your resume. And then you're gonna wanna have your contact information. So you don't necessarily have to use an email address. The things that I would suggest regarding your email address are make sure that it's one that you check so you're not missing communications from an employer, and also make sure that it has like a quote unquote professional name. So if you made your email address when you were 8 and it says like I love horses 123@gmail.com, don't put that one on your resume. Your phone number, and then your LinkedIn if it is updated. If you are in one of our creative fields, you can also include a link to a portfolio here. The standard rule of thumb that I will say about anything that you include on your resume is that if you're secretly hoping that no one looks at it, so for example, if you haven't updated your LinkedIn, or if your portfolio, like there's lots of broken links and pictures that you're not proud of, don't include it on the resume. So go into creating your resume, assuming that the recruiter or whoever's reading it is going to look at every aspect of it. So these are some sections that you can include on your resume. So for undergraduates, we recommend that you have your education section as your very first section. The reason for that is because a resume is not just about including all of the relevant content. It's about placing the content strategically so that recruiters can very quickly get the pieces of information that they're looking for. So for most of the jobs and educational opportunities, I'll say experiential learning opportunities that y'all will be applying for. At this point, you're going to either need to have an undergraduate degree in progress, or eventually you're going to need to have that degree under your belt, right? So you want them to be able to see education at the top, what you're studying very quickly, and be able to move on. There are lots of different things that you can include after that. So there's no one right way to do it. There's lots of different ways. On-campus activities, on-campus leadership, awards, publications that you've been a part of, experience. And that can be work experience, that can be volunteer experience, that can be just experience in different activities, leadership, relevant coursework that you've taken, research that you can participate in. All of those are sections that you can include in your resume. So a few misconceptions that I want to dispel is, one, you can only include it on your resume if you were paid for it. So if you did a volunteer position, if you did an unpaid internship, any of those kinds of things, it doesn't matter whether you were paid if you got experience. Another misconception that I want to dispel is that there are certain things that you can't put on your resume because they don't matter. A lot of students in college are having to work. I did it, Dr. Conley did it. A lot of students have to work during college. A lot of those jobs that you're able to work during college are service industry jobs. So those might not necessarily be the most relevant to your field, but especially as you're applying for those initial opportunities to get more experience, to get closer to the field that you're in, there are a lot of transferable skills that you can get from those service industry, retail, all of those kinds of jobs. It's all about the story that you're able to tell about it and the details that you're able to pull out, right? So we'll have an exercise in a little bit that I think will help contextualize this a little bit more. I've highlighted the skills section right here because this is where it's kind of like, if you don't know, you don't know. And it's some really easy missteps. So best practices for a resume are to include only hard skills in your skills section. So a hard skill is a quantifiable skill. So that means a language skill, a software skill, or a program skill. So that means any of those skills, you want to include them. So for example, if you are a Spanish speaker, you want to include that on your resume because that's a huge strength, that's a huge asset. You also want to include the level of proficiency, right? Because there's a difference between being a novice Spanish speaker and being someone who's fluent in Spanish. Same thing with programming languages, any of that kind of stuff. So even if you're a novice at it, you can include it on your resume. Just make sure to properly quantify the amount of experience that you have so they get an idea of what you're working with. Oops. Okay. So I think that's all I want to say about those sections for now, and then we can go back into that a little bit when we get into formatting. So the body of your resume, the bulk of your resume is going to be bullet points. And another same thing that I talked about with how you structure the order of your information. Bullet points make it so that employers can get quick, easy bites of information. If you have your resume in a narrative format, so if you have paragraphs, they're having to like look through a lot of information. They're not able to easily access the information that they're looking for. So bullet points are always the go-to format. There's a couple of best practices for bullet points. You want to start off with a strong action verb. So some of my like pet peeve, yes, Kang, very good observation. Bullet points will grab attention and they'll make it easy for the person to parse out the different things that you are talking about. So you want to start off with a strong action verb. So some of my pet peeve ones that I see a lot are like worked, responsible for, did, all of those kinds of things. Those are super vague umbrella words. They're not necessarily inaccurate, but they're not the strongest way to convey your experience, right? You also want to, when you're crafting a bullet point, and we'll dive into an exercise about this in just a second. You want to think about why your experience is relevant, right? So I almost think of that as the thing behind the thing. So for example, if you are a barista and you are looking to get into a marketing position, chances are the hiring manager doesn't care that you know how to make coffee, right? That might not be the most relevant aspect of your job, but you may talk to 50 some odd customers a day. You may have experience balancing multiple tasks and projects at a time, working in a fast-paced environment, communicating effectively with different audiences. Those are all things that would be relevant to a marketing manager, right? So when you are listing things on your resume, you don't just want to go through kind of a list of like a chore list of what you did. You want to think about what skills you used in those positions that are going to be relevant to an employer. So you're painting that picture, you're helping them understand what aspects of your experience make you a good candidate for the role that you're applying for. So that's what I mean when I say results-based versus task-based here. I see a lot of students in the initial process of creating a resume, it looks more like a chore list. It looks almost like, almost like a job description. So what I want you to reframe into is thinking, what results did I produce? What skills did I use? And which ones are going to be most relevant in terms of the thing that I'm applying for? Just a basic formatting thing, current positions, you're always going to put your words in present tense. So you're still doing those things. Past positions, you're going to write those in past tense. Concreteness and conciseness is also extremely important. Concrete data is huge in a resume. So anywhere that you can include, and when I say concrete data, I mean numbers, I mean impacts that you can quantify, any of that kind of stuff. If you can include it, if you can be specific, be specific. So I'll give a tangible example of that. I have a friend who was in the process of applying for some jobs, and she asked me, is it better to put juggled many projects at a time or juggled 15 projects at a time? It is absolutely better to specify 15 projects at a time because different words mean different things to different people, right? So if a recruiter, if she had just put juggled many projects at a time and a recruiter had read that, to one recruiter, that might mean 15 projects. To another recruiter, that might mean, oh, she probably did 3 or 4 projects at a time, right? So when she quantified and was specific about managed and juggled 15 projects at a time, that gave the recruiter a more clear picture of the types of environments that she has experience working in, right? So whenever you can be concrete, and we see this in examples of, like we have a lot of Oglethorpe students because of the amount of preschools in the area, for example. A lot of Oglethorpe students will do student teaching at preschools, right? So instead of saying managed many children at a time, you could say managed a classroom of 15 to 20 preschool age children, right? That's more quantifiable, that's more tangible. It gives them a clearer picture of the types of things that you're able to do. Same thing with impact. So especially for those looking at marketing positions or any position where you're going to have to, like fundraising positions where you're going to have to generate results, being able to quantify your impact, being able to say, when I took over the Instagram, we saw a 10% increase in followers. All of that kind of stuff is gold on your resume. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to keep track of that. So I saw a question in the chat, so I want to make sure to address that. Yeah, so King, I think that's a great way. So King put in the chat, rather than telling what you did, tell the skills that you gained from doing a particular job. So it's definitely going to be a mix of things, because some of the things are going to be, for example, if they're looking for someone who has experience, posting on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, posting and creating marketing content, that's going to be like a task that you want to make sure that you highlight you have experience doing, but you don't want to limit yourself to just the task. You also want to think about the skills that are behind the task as well. So it's definitely going to be a mix of those things. So we're going to keep talking about bullet points.
And students, while we're talking about bullet points, there is a document that we will share after class. I was trying to upload it here, but it wasn't working for me. It's our action verb cheat sheet. As Carly mentioned, just different ways, you don't want to say organized or collaborated over and over again. So we have an action verb cheat sheet for you that will give you an opportunity, and because maybe you did the similar things, but so that you can express that in a different way on your resume.
Absolutely. Yeah. And luckily our career development website is updated now. And so I'll send sort of an overview email with this PowerPoint and also some of the resources that will help y'all kind of accomplish these things that we're talking about. So these are some just bullet point examples, and then we'll go into an exercise to talk about reframing some bullet points. So streamlined package delivery process to minimize fuel usage and decrease expenditures by 10%. So we've got our action verb here. You're starting off with streamlined, right? That's a very concrete verb that gives you a clear picture of what was done. Then we talk about what they actually did. So they streamlined the package delivery process. And then here's where I'm talking about that impact, right? So to minimize fuel usage and also decrease expenditures by 10%. So they're not just saying, delivered packages, right? They're saying they streamlined this process and this is what it led to. This is what it created. So this could be an example of something for like mine or Dr. Conley's position. Educated, so we've got that concrete action verb. Educated students on career development best practices through semester-long curriculum. So I'm giving a tangible, I'm not just doing it for one workshop. I'm not just doing it for a couple weeks. I'm doing it through a whole semester curriculum, which generated an 8% increase in postgraduate hiring rate. That's a made-up statistic. Don't run with that one. But here I'm quantifying the impact, right? So this is going to be an opportunity for y'all to do like some participatory work, kind of starting to flex those muscles. So these are just some basic bullet points that you might see that would be very common for like a student who's initially starting resume creation. So worked front of house, making coffee and serving customers. Responsible for organizing and restocking shelves. Took care of children in preschool class, right? So these aren't bad bullet points, but they don't give me a very clear or compelling picture. So what I want to do is give y'all, I'm going to say like 3-ish minutes, we'll check in and pick just one of these bullet points. And based off the things that we've talked about, drop in the chat how you would rephrase that bullet point to make it more concrete and make it more relevant to the employer. So I'm going to give y'all about 3 minutes and then we'll check in and just pick one of them. I'm going to give us about another minute and then we'll start talking about some of these suggestions that I'm seeing. So feel free to, if you're still working on, feel free to drop in the chat. And this will be, I'll just, kind of pick on a few to kind of talk about what your thought process was. So one thing that I do want to say about resume building is it's a collaborative and like ever evolving process, right? So even if the things that you are, and I'll talk about this a little bit more. Don't be afraid to start with bare bones and then build from there, right? So one of the things that we see often are that students are embarrassed or like scared to bring their resume because they may be worried that they don't have enough experience or they're not sure about how to convey that experience, all of that kind of stuff. This is a very collaborative process. No one is born being good at this. It's a skill that you build just like any other skill. And also no one comes into the world with, like you're not born with experience, right? So it's something that you have to put active effort into gaining. So it's a collaborative process. You are never going to enter this career development space and be shamed for what you do or don't have on your resume. What we want to do is make it the most effective document possible for you, because applying for jobs and applying for school is work. And so we want you to get the most bang for your buck in terms of the labor that you're putting in, right? So I'm seeing some great suggestions here. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of these. So Kang, I see yours first. So you chose the third one and changed that from took care of children in preschool class to took initiative of a class of preschool children for a year curriculum. So if you wouldn't mind, if you feel comfortable unmuting and just giving kind of a quick summary of what your thought process was in reworking that bullet point.
So the reason I say like took initiative, because when you handle children, you have to be the leader. I would think of a teacher as a leader. So that's why I took the took initiative part. And then the reason I put for you curriculum is to be specific. Like, yes, I did teach this preschool class for a year.
So you said something very important, Kang. You said as a teacher, you're a leader. So in this one, I might use an action verb that said led a class of preschool age children for a year curriculum. And did you build that curriculum for the students? You would include that. You would also, how many students did you lead in that class for a year? As Carly mentioned, that quantitative information, that information about quantity is very important to an employer, because again, when the reader or recruiter is looking at this, it's like, oh wow, preschool age children 4 to 5 or 7, 8 years old, and maybe you had 20 students that you were leading. That again shows your responsibility as an instructor, and also shows that you're a trustworthy individual without you having to say that in an interview.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that contribution, Kang. So we're not gonna have time to go through all of them because I want to make sure that we kind of get through the rest of the content, and I want to be mindful of y'all's time. I would like to ask Diana if you feel comfortable talking about yours. You also picked the third one and said tended to the emotional and physical needs of children through year-long course. If you want to talk about your thought process behind that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so I was a bit confused. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm in the cafeteria. Okay, so I wasn't sure if we were like a teacher or this was like a daycare thing. So I thought it was more like daycare and taking care of the kids. So I just included like um, everything that goes into taking care of kids is not just like watching them, but looking after them, like physically feeding them and like emotionally handling conflicts. And I just put through a year-long course. I just like specified how long it was, how long I think it is.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I think that you pointed out a really, really important point of the resume creation process, which is that there are different aspects of jobs and different aspects of the same job may be more or less relevant for different positions, right? So for example, let's say that these are from the same position. And in Kang's case, maybe your application is for a job that says we need someone who has experience in curriculum building, right? In that case, you definitely want to make sure to highlight that curriculum building, that following curriculum aspect. Versus if Diana is talking about the exact same position and applying to a job that is talking about being like a life coach or a peer mentor, right? Those tending to the emotional and physical needs of children, those social emotional competencies, those are going to be really important for that type of position, right? So this is what I'm talking about in terms of the same position can have a lot of different aspects that you can highlight. So one of the skills that you build in resume creation is finding, and a lot of that information will be in the job description or in the prompts that you're given based on what you're applying for. A lot of that you can also get by talking to people who do the position, by researching the different types of jobs and experiential learning opportunities that you're applying for. But part of resume creation is understanding which aspects of your experiences are going to be most important to highlight. So those were some awesome examples. Yeah, and Dr. Conley pointed out in the chat, when you're working with children, you'll often have CPR certifications or some sort of safety certification. So that's something that you can include on your skills section or in a separate certification section. So the kind of too long didn't read of this is like, don't take any aspects of your experience for granted. Where you can be explicit, especially if it's in terms of a skill that they're specifically looking for, be explicit about it. And Kang, you asked, start with the bare bone and then build up from there. I think that's a great point, and I'm gonna circle back to that when we talk about kind of some tips and tricks for resume building. So definitely appreciate you making that point. So next slide. So these are just some formatting basics. You're gonna want to choose an accessible 10 to 12 point font, no color. And so really quickly, I'm going to talk about applicant tracking systems. So applicant tracking systems, or ATS, are types of software that lots of organizations are moving toward using them. It's a type of software that screens your resume because most job applications happen online now. The organizations are experiencing higher volumes of applicants, which means that they need to automate some of those processes. So applicant tracking systems will scan your resume for different keywords, different aspects of the job. They'll give your resume a score based on the content of it, and then it will either get passed on to a recruiter or it will get tossed in the virtual trash, in a manner of speaking. And so the reason that the content is super important, the formatting is also super important because applicant tracking systems can be kind of finicky. And so you may have a super stellar resume with tons of great experiences, but if you've built that in Canva and it has tons of pictures and colors and icons, an applicant tracking system will not be able to parse out the information it needs. So in terms of making sure that, like I said, you get the most bang for your buck, you get the most like fruit out of your labor, you are going to want to keep your resume formatting very basic, very standard. So that's a 10 to 12 point font, and that can be like a Calibri, at Times New Roman, one of those situations. The whole your heading can be a different font, so like your actual name. Everything else should be the same font. Keep your margins between 0.5 and 1 inch. Use your formatting such as italics, bold, or caps strategically. So for example, if you are bolding one section heading, every section heading should be bolded. So it's kind of like having a key for what information is located where. And your experiences should be in reverse chronological order. So that means your most recent near the top of each section, and then you'll go back in time from there. A couple of other things about applicant tracking systems: they cannot parse out, they cannot read information that is in text boxes or columns. Sometimes they can 2 columns, but it's safest to just go with 1 column. Also pictures, icons, sometimes even those like fancy lines that can throw off its ability to read. So when I say keep it simple, keep it basic in terms of formatting, I'm not saying that to like stifle you creatively. I'm saying that because I don't want your applications tossed in the virtual garbage. And so we have a couple of, there's a video that Dr. Conley likes to share about applicant tracking systems. So I'll make sure to also link that in the resources that I send y'all. So we've already talked on this, so I'm not going to harp on it too much more, but the most important element of your resume is going to be tailoring it to the job description. So a lot of students are under the impression that you will create one resume and then you will just kind of like keep sending that out. That unfortunately is not the case. And you can do that. It's certainly an option. But if you are wanting to get responses from places, if you are wanting to increase the likelihood that your resume gets to an actual person, you are going to want to tailor it to the job description. And so the more that you build these skills, the more that you sort of narrow down what types of jobs and fields you're applying for. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel every single time you do a job application. You may have, for example, if you are a psychology major, you may be applying for administrative positions. You may also be applying for a couple of research positions. You may also be applying for a couple of customer service positions. So in that case, you would maybe create a resume that was tailored for your administrative positions that you're applying for, create one that's tailored for research, and create one that's tailored for customer service. And then all you have to do is, depending on the differences between each job that you're applying for, you tweak those resumes. So you don't have to reinvent it every single time, but you do want to make sure that you are tailoring it to the job descriptions, because those applicant tracking systems and the HR people reading your resumes look for those keyword matches. So you have to make those explicit. Dr. Conley, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, just well, that you absolutely must tailor it to the job description, and though we'll get into cover letters at a later time, but same thing with your cover letter. And as Carly mentioned, you're going to have a master sort of resume that you use. And as you go on in your collegiate career and as you become more of a specialist in your role, you won't have to do as much tailoring because you'll get closer to your specific area of interest, specific in your discipline. So if you're going into business or going into STEM or going into psychology, you'll be applying for those roles in those disciplines and you won't have to tailor it as much. But you always want to look at the requirements that they're seeking in the job description and make sure that your resume and cover letter, which we'll talk about in the future, are speaking to those specific skills they're requesting in the job description, in the job description.
Absolutely. So a couple of recommendations, especially if you are new to creating resumes, I never ever recommend that you try and take the information straight from your brain onto your resume. That's a lot of task loading at once, right? It's almost like translation, where you're trying to take the information in your brain, you're trying to remember all the jobs that you did, you're trying to remember what you did at those jobs, when you did them, and then you're trying to put it into this funky language that like realistically no one uses in their everyday life, so it's not going to come naturally to you. It's just a lot of stuff to do at once. So I always recommend planning beforehand. So whatever that looks like for you, that can be creating a list, that can be creating a spreadsheet, that can be creating like a web, whatever works for you in terms of documenting all of those things, getting it out. Like Kang mentioned, kind of getting out those bare bones, getting off those checkpoints that you want to make sure that you highlight. And then you can work on putting it into the correct formatting and adding those action verbs and fleshing out the bullet points. So I would say start broad. So start with, this is the job that I did, and then get more specific from there. So you can start by listing out those tasks and then branch off from all of those tasks. What skills did I use? What are the specific things that fall under this? I would also say don't edit as you go, because I think that is a lot of task loading too. That makes it more difficult. I would say undergrad resumes, the resume that you submit, you're typically going to want to submit a one-page resume. There are very rare exceptions, especially for like our STEM folks who have maybe more research or more projects. But don't try and edit as you go. Get the things out on the page, like do your planning, then make your first draft, then edit your draft. Because if you're trying to edit as you go, what I find is that's when things kind of devolve into this really fluffy, like almost meaningless language. So get the things out however you need to, and then you can go back and you can keep refining. One big thing that I think everyone should know also, when you are going into experiences, is track your outcomes and tasks as you're in a position. So this can look like a note in your phone. This can look like a Google Doc that you keep track of. I think a lot of people, including myself, like I'm a fairly new professional. A lot of people have the idea that people will advocate for you and that they will notice your hard work. And I wish that that was how it worked, but unfortunately it is often not. And so if you get in the practice now of, for example, if you're at an internship and they say, oh my goodness, you were our top sales intern this semester, you raised such and such amount of money or such and such amount of customers, have a little note in your phone where you write like sales internship summer 2023 did this and this thing, right? If you track that as you go, it's going to be so much easier, number one, to build your resume, because you won't have to be thinking, okay, what is this thing that I did 3 months ago? What is this thing that I did 2 years ago? And also that is an advocacy tool that you have for as you stay with an organization, when you're talking about raises, when you're talking about promotions, all of that kind of stuff. If you are able to track and quantify your impact, you are putting yourself in the best position to be your own advocate. So that is a practice that I would recommend, no matter how early the position, no matter how early in your career, start that practice now. So I know that was just like a lot of information about resumes. I planned to go into cover letters really quickly. I think we'll do kind of a more high level overview of cover letters. And then that can be something that we do some follow up on as well, especially if you want more of an individual appointment. I'd at least like to demystify kind of what a cover letter is. And then we'll have some time for questions. And I'm seeing some things in the chat. Yes, so Kang, I think you're making a great point. So King mentioned, say I'm a math instructor for students and I want to apply for a job in the medical field. By teaching students, I gained the experience of handling the needs of people face to face, which is recommended for a job in the medical field. So I think that's a great point. The actual, like, your ability to do complex algebra may not be super important to someone in terms of hiring you to be like a bench scientist or a medical scribe, but your ability to interact with people face to face may be a really important aspect of that experience that you have, that you gained experience in. So I think that's an excellent point. So another fun little cover letter memes. So cover letters are important. They're also something that I find that they seem a lot more daunting because a lot of people don't know what the heck they are. They're actually, in my opinion, not that crazy or scary. It's just you need to know kind of what they are. So a cover letter is an introduction to an employer. It allows you to express specific interest in a role, and it allows you to add context to select experiences from your resume. So kind of the way that I like to think about it is your resume is going to be the skeleton, your resume is the bones. Cover letter allows you to add a little bit more meat to those bones. And then ideally your interview is going to be where you can flesh that stuff out even more. So a cover letter has a little bit more opportunity for personality than a resume. You're able to use first person pronouns like I, we, me, my, which you shouldn't do in a resume. And so it just allows you to go a little bit in depth, a little bit further in depth into some of those experiences. So cover letter in terms of formatting, I'm just going to start from the top down. So you want it to be the same heading as your resume. So those, like they used to say when I was learning how to do makeup when I was a teenager, that your eyebrows should be sisters, not twins. That's how I like to think of the resume and cover letter, right? So you want them to be documents that have same heading, similar formatting, similar font, but they're just going to look slightly different because they're different documents. This part, these heading sections, don't overcomplicate. I have students try to get creative all the time. These are gimmies. These are things so you can plug in your first and last name, your contact information, exactly like you did on your resume. And then you plug in the date. You're going to want to write that in long form. So writing out the actual month and day. And then plugging in the employer name, their title, their company, and the mailing address. Point on this, I've written Dear Hiring Manager. If you have access to their name, so if you happen to know whether it's listed in the job description, whether someone recommended you for the role, if you happen to know the name of the hiring manager, you can use their name. If you don't have access to it, just write Dear Hiring Manager. Another thing that I would say in terms of salutations and everything here, just be careful about titles. So that can be Mr., Miss, Mix, Doctor, etc. I always try to look up the title of the person that I am addressing it to, because the last thing that you want is to start someone off with a bad impression in terms of like misgendering them or referring to them by a title that is like if you say, if you were to write a letter to, it makes me like cringe every time people write to Dr. Conley and they're like, hello, Miss Conley. Not that it's bad to be a miss, but she is a doctor. And so, she worked hard for that degree, would prefer to be addressed as doctor. So just long short of that is make sure that if you're going to address someone by a specific name, look on LinkedIn or look on their like staff bio on the website and make sure that you can get as close as you are able to in terms of the information available to their actual title. And then you're going to want to use a colon and not a comma here. So not kind of like traditional letter writing. You're just going to want to use a colon here. And then this format that I'm going to talk about is the ABC method. It's not the only way to write cover letters, but I think it's a good way to start out. So ABC stands for about, because, close. So you're going to start off the first paragraph by introducing yourself. So that's, I am a first year business student at Oglethorpe University. You're going to name the position that you're applying for and why you're interested. So what about that position attracts you? What about that position connects to your long-term goals? And then in this first paragraph, also, if you were encouraged to apply for this position by someone that you met in a networking capacity. So for example, if you're applying for a position at Coca-Cola and someone said, hey, I know a recruiter there, that's where you can include that. The because paragraph is probably going to be, sometimes it'll get split into two, but that's going to be the bulk of your cover letter. So you're going to be using specific examples of skills that you have and how you've applied them. And you're going to want to expand on a few of the most important things from your resume. The term that I will always use here is choose depth over breadth. And what I mean by that is choose a couple of experiences, one or two experiences that are relevant that you can expand on and go deeper with them versus trying to rehash everything on your resume. Because what you're going to find is if you try to hit on absolutely all of those points, you're not going to have space to have any more content than you have on your resume. So choose to go deeper with a few things rather than high level on a bunch of things. Another thing that I think it's important to highlight for students who are early in their career is a lot of times the sort of power dynamic in job applications, you feel you're like, I need this job, I need this position. You're thinking about the benefit that they can offer for you. When you are selling yourself as a candidate, you want to highlight the benefit that you can offer them. And a lot of times I see people like, I don't have any benefit. I don't have these skills or whatever. Everyone has value to offer. Everyone has benefit to offer. So that is where career development is also a huge self-reflection process, to be able to go look back at the experiences that you have, the unique skills that you have, the unique values that you have, and be able to tell your own story, right? So if that's something that you feel comfortable or that you feel uncomfortable with at this point, that's something to practice doing right now. So I just like to highlight that as well. That you want to make sure that when you are creating these documents, that you are highlighting the value that you have to offer. And like Dr. Conley said, no one will advocate for you more than you. And so I saw a couple things pop up in the chat. So yes, Dr. Conley mentioned be careful when applying to multiple roles. So triple check that you're sending your cover letter to the right organization. And that even goes down to like the title of the document. So when you save documents, just save them, and I'm going to put, if I was doing mine, I would write Carly_Burrell_resume. And then sometimes I could specify. So if I'm applying for this position at Oglethorpe, I would say Carly _Burrell_resume_OU, right? So make sure like that you're not just putting, document 1. That's not a super impressive title. Like every little aspect of that matters. So just make sure that it's a professional title and that it's the right one, both on the title of the document and in the contact information, that you are submitting it to the correct role. I was just going to say also on the chat, Kang said, so don't say that you want the career for money when they ask why you want this career. That is unfortunately one of the fun little games that you have to play. I am under no impression that none of you are interested in making money, right? Everyone at the end of the day, I think most of us would choose, like if we could make money without having a job, that we would choose to do so. So I understand that everyone wants money. That is one of those fun little games, one of those fun little things that you have to dance around. The money, it's totally okay if the money is what is attracting you to a position, but that is one of those secret rules that is not the answer that you should give, because they are wanting to know that your values match up, that your skills match up, that your passion for the position matches up. So totally valid reason to want a job, because that's kind of the only reason that you are applying for jobs. But make sure that that's not the thing that you highlight in your cover letter. So excellent point, Ping.
So very quickly, I want to say as I said in the chat, triple check in your cover letter where you're sending to an organization. As a recruiter and a hiring manager, I've received letters, oh, Kennesaw State resume or Georgia Tech resume. So I know that that person also applied for a job at Georgia Tech as well. So it's like it's an attention to detail. And often someone is saying in their cover letter, I have great attention to detail, but yet you sent me a cover letter that is addressed to Georgia Tech.
Yes, very, and it's one of those, especially in terms of those small mistakes. And it's kind of the same thing when people say like, does grammar matter? Or like, does the spacing really matter? And all of that kind of stuff. Like, probably it doesn't say a whole ton about the quality of worker that you are, but it would really suck to have all of these awesome experiences and then get denied for a job purely because you didn't bother to spell check or because you didn't bother to, include like the correct name of the document or correct address, right? So it's just a matter of like, set yourself up in the best position that you possibly can. Be intentional about the things that you're using as application materials, because you wouldn't want that. Like, it would be extremely frustrating to get denied for a job based off of something really small like that. And then I saw a question in the chat. So none of the things that I sent were meant to be links. They're just examples of how you can format the names of your documents. So the first two would be good examples. So having your name, underscore, resume, and the last one, document one, would be an example of what I wouldn't do. And then Kang said, so people are more likely to remember the bad things than the good things. I don't necessarily know that they're more or less likely to, but I would say that I just want to give them as few negative things to remember as possible. So I don't think it's a risk worth taking, right? If you can avoid, especially those like tiny little details, because it is possible depending on who you catch. Yeah, Dr. Conley said some hiring managers are petty. So some people will remember the bad things over the good things. So all in all, no matter who you're applying to, you want to set yourself up as much as possible for success. And so moving back to this, and then we'll wrap up cover letters really quickly and we'll have time for questions. The close or confidence paragraph is going to be, you're going to restate your interest in the position, highlight your preparation to be successful, and then open the door for follow-up. So that's going to be just a nice little wrap up, reminding them of the position that you're applying for, remind them of why you're interested in it. And then you're, something like, I'm very excited to hear about next steps, look forward to hearing from you, things like that. So just a nice little wrap up. And then this is the bottom. You're going to want to include like a warm close here. So sincerely is a super easy one. And then a signature, and then your typed first and last name. I will say, if you have like a tablet or something where it's really easy to insert a handwritten signature, I would say do that. If you don't, choosing just like a fancy cursive font, just like I did here, is a totally fine thing to do. So it's more of a formality. And then, yeah, so this is just a list of resources consulted. So various other institutional career development. Career development is just like a conglomeration of all of our collective knowledge. So thank you to these people. And then I see that Dr. Conley put something in the chat, and then we'll talk about questions. Yeah, so resume is the marketing tool that opens the door. Being error-free is important. Also cover letters, the importance of a cover letter, even though they're really annoying. Like I won't beat around the bush. I don't like writing cover letters, and this is my job. They can be really annoying, but they can also be a really key difference maker. Sometimes people will include cover letters in the application purely just to see who does it and who doesn't. Some people won't even consider the people, even if it says it's optional. Sometimes that's an easy way to weed out who wants it real bad and who doesn't. Another thing is, especially in terms of entry-level positions and undergrad, straight out of undergrad positions, you may not be the most qualified person for most of the roles that you're applying for, and that's fine. It is not always the most qualified person who gets hired for the role. Sometimes it is the best fit. And a cover letter is an additional opportunity that you are giving yourself to make a case for why you're a good fit, even if there's certain experiences or qualifications that you're missing. So a cover letter, it's again, another crucial component of setting yourself up for the most success. If you're going to be applying for tons of jobs, you want those to be You want those to be job applications that have impact, right? So that you're not just doing all of that labor to get ghosted by a bunch of people. Because like, spoiler alert, you're going to get ghosted by a bunch of employers anyways. It's just a thing that happens now. So as much as you can minimize that chance, as much as you can make yourself an impactful candidate, do that. And I see slide back to before the sources. Yes. So this is, and this resource, this cover letter template that we have, there's actually some updates to it that I've made since I made this PowerPoint. So all of that, I'll show you in our follow-up email where to access this template on the website. So you'll have access to all these resources as well as the PowerPoint. Okay, so questions. I know that's a ton of information. Remember, this is also going to be a recording. So you'll have access to the recording as well. So if you're like, yeah, I just feel like they sprayed me with a fire hose for 60 minutes, this is something that you'll have access to go back to. Any questions? And let's try and say, just for the sake of respecting everyone's time, if it's specific questions about like a specific case scenario for a document that you have, let's save those for an individual appointment or maybe asking Dr. Conley during class time. And let's keep the questions in this space just kind of general for the sake of time, if anyone has any. Is there a template that you have for resume and cover letter? Yes, Kang, great question. Templates for resumes and cover letters are available on our website. So that's another one of the resources that I'll be linking. And those are always kind of being updated. So there's a few that we already have on the website, and there's a few that are going to go up in the next week or two. Diana said, would it be okay to list the college classes you took or not? Great question. So especially as a first year student, if you don't have a lot of experience, or if you're a student who hasn't necessarily had the opportunity to do an experiential learning activity, coursework is a great way to supplement to show that you do have some experience with the types of skills that they're looking for. The thing that I would say is make sure that if you're listing relevant coursework, that it's truly relevant coursework and not just coursework that they can intuit by your major that you took. So an example of that would be like if you are a fourth year accounting student, don't list accounting 101 on your major or on your resume. They know that you took that, right? One of the things that I also want to say specifically in the case of OU, I know that people have varieties of feelings about the core curriculum. Some of those core classes can actually be huge assets in terms of listing them on your resume, especially if you need some additional things to make you stand out, if you need some additional filler and some additional content, because the core, I mean, it really does differentiate OU. Like most other institutions are not offering classes like the core. And so that really differentiates you as a well-rounded candidate. So just think of in terms of like, you know, if in terms of jobs that you're applying for, that's another way that you can make yourself stand out. It's also a really great way, for example, if there's some of those hard skills like programming or projects or things like that, that you haven't necessarily had the chance to have a job or an internship, but you've done them in class, that still counts as experience. And so if you, like, those are absolutely things that you can highlight on your resume. So long, short, yes, definitely you can list coursework. Just make sure that it's truly coursework that actually makes an impact and it's not just generic courses that every other person with your major is taking. King, great question. How does the core differentiate us from others? I'm worried employers that would ask that. So one of the things about the core, employers are often looking for people with well-rounded skill sets. So critical thinking, communication skills, those may seem like gimmies to y'all because you're all liberal arts students, right? You all got into Oglethorpe. You're like, yeah, I know how to critically think. I know how to communicate. I'm developing those skills right now. Not everyone knows how to do those things. Another thing about the core is that it, in an increasingly globalized world, in a world where most careers don't happen in silos, right? Like, so if, for example, if you are working in public health, you have to be able to talk to tons of different audiences. You have to be able to talk to psychologists and doctors and also like lay people. You have to be able to talk to very highly educated people and people with less access to education. In all career fields, you are going to benefit from having a well-rounded education and from being able to talk to different types of people about different types of things. The core sets you up very well to do that. So it sets you up well in terms of like academics. You're getting knowledge about a broad range of fields. It also sets you up well in terms of like, it makes you more interesting and able to engage with different types of people. So one of the key things about job searching and networking is that so much of it happens outside of formal settings, right? So you don't just need to be able to talk to someone in an interview setting, in a job setting. You need to be able to like mingle at a networking event or talk on like the golf course or whatever, which is a thing that I would never do. But like you need to be able to talk to different types of people about different types of things in different types of settings. The core gives you like well-rounded abilities to do that. Like Dr. Conley said, it gives you interdisciplinary skills that are going to be relevant no matter what field that you go into. And I have had like, I have had alums come back and say like, I hated the core while I was doing it, or I didn't get the point. And then they come back and give like really specific anecdotes about like, I was at a networking hour with someone and they were talking about, you know, Picasso's art versus Monet's art or whatever. And I was able to engage because of a core class that I took. So like, I'm not making that up. I have heard those types of like creepy specific anecdotes from alumni of this institution. So it really does make a difference. So we are exactly at time. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I definitely have a few minutes. So if anyone would like to hang out and ask any more questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes. If you need to bounce, feel free to go. And expect a follow-up email either by end of day today or tomorrow.